around long. I mean, let's be clear. We wrote the history. We changed the world. It's y'all turn now. What we won, y'all are going to be the ones who have to defend it and protect it. Benjamin Franklin, when he came out with the Constitution of Invention, was asked, Mr. Franklin, what do we have? He said, we have a republic, meaning a democracy, if we can keep it. So the role of young people should be, do what I told you to do. Get the snicker tapes, read the books sold at the snicker, study that, and that's the roadmap. Now y'all can change the priorities and the language, but the one thing you cannot change, the one thing you should not attempt to change, is getting people to empower themselves to bring about the kind of world and government that will be conducive to the health, welfare, and enjoyment of life for everyone, just like the sheriff said. We can bring people together, but we should not try to bring people together around ignorance, around hate, or around separation.
My name is Clipchamp. I'm with Freedom Project, and my question is,
when did the civil rights movement start? That's a really good question. It's something that a lot of people disagree on. I argue that the civil rights movement comes out of World War II. African Americans, it's important to note, have been struggling for equality for well long before even World War II or before the 1950s and 1960s. But one of the great civil rights stories that I've ever read and heard about is when Charles and Medgar Evers came back from World War II. They were veterans. They fought in World War II, and they came back to Mississippi and tried to register to vote. And people pushed back against them, tried to prevent them from voting. These were people who had worn the United States uniform, had performed heroic acts serving their country, but they weren't discouraged. And so many veterans, so many people who came out of World War II came back home and said, we're not going to let this be the same country that we left, and we're going to try to change it.
I certainly agree with that, but I also want to point out to you, if you read Local People by John Dickman, he talks about the challenge to Senator Billboard. And the way it was done, they made it, they wouldn't subpoena witnesses. Witnesses had to volunteer and come and face the senators who wanted to protect Billboard. 400 black Mississippians showed up at the hearing. And one of the registrars from Pike County argued that, yes, I discriminated against darkies. I asked them questions that 25 of the best lawyers in the state can't answer to the federal government. That's what he said. But the beautiful thing is, the resistance shown by them, they knew what they were up against, but they went in and they tried to do what was right. And what we must do, each one of us, and I'm glad to see so many people from Sunflower. Y'all are special. Y'all have asked more questions. Y'all got more courage. The rest of these people are scared because the Lord loves them too. Now, it is very, very important that your obligation is to, when you see something that's wrong, don't accept it. Don't say, you know, they might not understand me. If it's right, you stand for it. And people will come around to you. Remember when the movement first started? It was 15 to 20 people. And then, as we got more people to understand, if you want to make a better life for your children, you've got to get in this movement. And they came and they took it over, and they came to movement. Take over and do right. We trust you. Now you live up to our promise.
My name is Chris Perkins. I'm with the Freedom Project. My question is to everybody. Toward the end of the 1960s, many historians argue that the civil rights movement was moving away from issues like voting rights and racial equality, more toward issues like ending the poverty and education. And my question is, since the end of the 1960s, what progress have we made toward, particularly toward education equality, and what still needs to be made?
I'm going to be quiet. Yes.
I want to take the first part of your question. You're right, many historians do say that the civil rights movement shifted in the late 1960s toward the focus on poverty. I would say that that focus was there all along, that it was never a case of voting rights, integrating public accommodations, and then economic justice. They were all part of the same thing. Okay, they were all part of that same thing. What part of this question?
No, what was the,
What advances have been made since the 1960s, particularly in education equality, and where do we need to go from here?
I think there's quite a few advances in federal funding for education, which is now a reality. It's severely threatened, but it's greatly improved. I think that Lyndon Johnson put more legislation into actuality that had been dreamed of by the socialists. I heard Norman Thomas speak at Howard University when SNCC was deciding whether or not we'd have a summer project. And Norman Thomas came and he said these words to us: "You can't win by singing, but you can't win unless you sing." Then he went on to talk about all of the programs they had developed, the 8-hour week, unemployment compensation, Social Security, but FDR put it into law. So let's not look at this as, let's not make two mistakes. One mistake people make, and the right wing wants us to make it, is that the federal government is an enemy. Federal government, my definition of the federal government is an instrumentality that allows the facilitation of the expression of all Americans. That ain't no enemy. That's an ally. And remember, God's a Democrat.
Now, I'd like to use my prerogative as the chair tonight to get us this is a critical question that you're raising. And Ms. Rose Turner, her work and her life personifies and answers to your question. She's a union organizer, United Food and Drug Workers Union. And we at the University of Florida love this labor union. We know it because last year, we spent a Friday morning interviewing members of this union. Catholic workers, heroic women, women who risked their livelihoods to organize a union. And they did it, they told us, not for themselves, but for others, for their sister workers, for their families, for their children, for their grandchildren. And this is part of the work, and I mentioned in the beginning, the title of the panel, Chaos or Community, where do we go from here? Dr. King ended his life, the final crusade was to travel to a city by the name of Memphis, Tennessee. And why did he go there? On his way to the Poor People's Campaign, the sanitation workers of the city of Memphis, the poorest of the poor, men who could work full-time, 40, 50 hours a week, were still paid so low that they qualified for welfare benefits. Full-time workers did not even pay their families because the city of Memphis had set the wage salary so low. 2 of them were killed in a terrible accident that were crushed to death by garbage compactors. They went out on strike. The city refused to bargain with them. Dr. King changed his whole itinerary to travel to Memphis, Tennessee, because he said, all along we've been working on this Poor People's Campaign. It's a great idea. We're trying to end poverty. We're trying to empower poor people. Poor people now are doing it for themselves. They're out on strike. They're saying, we're not going back to work until you recognize this as a union and you give us collective bargaining rights, the right to make a living wage. Rose Turner is the personification of that struggle. And again, last year when we were interviewing the union workers, every day the union goes out with its staff up and down the Mississippi Delta and organizes workers one by one by one. And I think she wouldn't mind me saying this. They probably lose more battles than they win, but they carry on that legacy of the civil rights movement. It's important for us to remember the subtitle of the March on Washington. It was the March on Washington for what? Jobs and freedom. The organizers Philip Randall, Byron Russell, the women and men who organized people to get to Washington, D.C. And I know that Mr. Guyot remembers this quite well. Many of them were African-American trade unionists, many of them from a union called District 65. And they organized the buses and the carloads of people to come to D.C. And when A. Philip Randolph spoke in that podium, he said that civil rights without economic justice is just a slogan. It doesn't mean much if you have civil rights in a society where you don't have the right to a decent job, decent wages, decent working conditions, right to unionize. Dr. King, and I'm not trying to have a King-centered narrative, felt that collective bargaining was a linchpin of the civil rights struggle and where it needed to emphasize and move forward. Does everyone know what collective bargaining is? Okay? To answer a lot of the questions where you go over here, you have to learn about it. In Florida, we have a union of faculty members. I'm in that union. And a lot of times my students say, unions are for professors, they're for campus workers, or other people, other than us. But it's important to remember the economic components. In fact, it gets back to your question, Professor. We have allowed ourselves, I think, in my opinion as a historian, to build an economy that does not serve the interests of the majority of people in the society. And we have got to decide whether we're going to continue spinning our gears and perpetuate this society. If you travel, you go to pockets of people who live in this country, black, white, Hispanic, Asian American, who suffer from the levels of unemployment that Martin Wesley mentioned. Sometimes it's 10%, sometimes 15%, sometimes 30%. At the same time, we have individuals in positions of power who are talking about ending collective bargaining rights in America. Taking it so far back in history, I can't even, as a historian, I can't even tell you how far back that goes. Except to say now we're talking about Poland in 1979, where the major struggle was to form a free and independent trade union against Soviet domination. When you talk about ending collective bargaining in American society, my friends, you're talking about tyranny. And anyone who would advocate that position has to really come to grips with that. That sounds like an editorial moment, and it is, but I'm thinking here about these rich questions. Where do we go from here? The economic component of this ties into education. Why do I, as a student, if I, as a young person, and I talk to young people every day at the University of Florida, and they say, what is the point of education if I can't get a good job at the end of the day? And if we don't start grappling with that and dealing with that, then the whole education system is really going to continue to suffer. But
I want to say, look, this man has interviewed 77 people. I was the number 77. He is continuing the tradition of the Highlander Summer. He's continuing the tradition of Bell Baker. And he's continuing the tradition of student nonviolent coordinator. He understands and he's sending a message to us. There's information in power. Information is power. And I want to congratulate you because I think it is very necessary. See, everyone who's in this meeting is going to be asked, what happened in that meeting? And what they really mean is, I didn't miss much by missing, by not attending. And what you got to say to them is that you heard some good information, but you're going to test it out to see how true it is. And they should help you do it. If you want something done, you get a busy person to help you. He's a busy man, and I'm proud of him.
Any questions? Comments? All right, well, we have one question. Okay.
what suggestion do you make?
Who do you direct the question to?
You.
All right, let me say this. We can leave here with some simple directions. Number one, recognize the labor union as an example of people who have to organize or they don't. There's a direct correlation between the labor union's ability to organize and their ability to keep their jobs. Number two, labor's business is our business. We've got to train ourselves to be involved in issues other than the ones that immediately affect us, because empowerment affects us all. Number two, buy the SNCC books. Buy the SNCC tapes. If there was anything better than that or equal to that, I wouldn't be pushing it so hard. I don't get a percentage on those tapes. But I know they're the most effective in American history. Use them. And don't be afraid of taking on people who are more powerful than you. If anyone, there would have never been a civil rights movement in Mississippi if we thought that Mississippi was going to give up, because it was destined never to give up. Every right that was won in Mississippi was taken by people like you. They were no smarter than you, no more courageous than you, no more patriotic than you, no more religious than you. Go out and practice what you say you believe in. Take power and use it well. And don't be afraid of power. People say, oh, they scream out, I don't know how I would do if I had power. I tell you what, you make many more decisions with power than you'll ever make if you're powerless. And I want to congratulate these group of writers over here. We all
right, well, we have brochures up front. We have a sign-up sheet. We also have, I think, some tapes, maybe videotapes from last year's event we'd like to put in your hands. And again, let's give a warm